Started.
There it goes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the Conservation Stewardship Program Applicant Informational Session. My name is Fran DeFicio, and I'm a program specialist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service here in New Jersey. Before we get started, I would like to inform everyone that this session is being recorded for those that could not attend or for anyone that would like to hear the information again. At the conclusion of this meeting, we will make the and PowerPoint presentation available. During the meeting, I want to encourage questions. Please ask a question by raising your hand, posting a question in the chat, or by unmuting and simply asking your question. Gail Bartok, New Jersey NRCS's Assistant State Conservationist for Programs, will keep a close eye on raised hands and posted questions. Throughout the meeting, you will hear me and possibly others refer to the Conservation Stewardship Program as CSP, and of course, Natural Resources Conservation Service as NRCS. I would like to ask any New Jersey NRCS employees that are part of the agenda or will help in other ways during this session to please turn on your camera for a moment and state your name and position the first time you speak. It's nice to put a name with a face. We'll then turn off our cameras to save connectivity, which can sometimes be an issue. For our guests, this evening, if you do have a question and you would like to state your name before asking a question, it would be appreciated, but certainly not required. And the use of your camera is not a requirement either. We don't have an overwhelming agenda, because our main focus is to give you, our CSP applicants, a brief overview of the program to help you understand the next steps to CSP. We'll have opening remarks by New Jersey NRCS State Conservationist Julie Hawkins. I'll give a basic CSP overview. Uziel Torres, Acting State Agronomist and Soil Conservationist in the Woodstown Service Center, and Betsy McShane, State Biologist, will present enhancement scenarios, and I will give a few payment examples based on those scenarios. Uziel and I will cover what to expect next and what you can do to prepare for your CSP meeting with NRCS. Nancy Paolini, Resource Conservationist, will follow up with a farmers.gov presentation, and for anyone that would like to ask questions at the end, we will welcome those. With that, Julie, please proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Fran, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our session tonight on our Conservation Stewardship Program, otherwise known as CSP. We want to certainly acknowledge how valuable your time is, especially during the busy spring planting season. So again, thank you for being with us. The CSP program pays farmers to actively manage the conservation work on their farms and build advanced conservation into your operation. We applaud you for applying to improve your land stewardship and your intention to improve your natural resources. We hope this session is informative and shows you the benefits of CSP to you and to your land. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Fran.
Thank you, Julie. Before I proceed to the next slide, again, I encourage questions. Some of us have been doing our jobs for a very long time, and we assume that everyone knows or clearly understands what we are saying, and that may not be the case. I also encourage my coworkers to help me out if needed. There's a specific question as we move through the presentation about land uses such as cropland, pasture land, or forestry, for example. I may need some assistance. So what is Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP? CSP provides comprehensive conservation assistance as in technical to farmers on a whole farm basis through payments, and that would be financial assistance for actively managing and maintaining current conservation efforts, expanding and improving on them, as in your ongoing effort and adding new conservation activities, all while you work your land for production and profit. CSP contracts provide annual payments, boosting the bottom line of participating farmers as they improve their agricultural resilience to benefit the environment and future generations. That is what CSP is in a few short words. Who is eligible? CSP includes cropland, pasture, and non-industrial private forest land. The farmstead and other associated agriculture land on which resource concerns can be addressed is also eligible, as long as they are part of the farming operation that has one of the land uses just mentioned. Applicants must enroll all acres that they operate, whether owned or rented. Publicly owned land is only eligible when it's part of an operation that has privately owned land associated with it. Is CSP competitive? When you apply, your application is ranked based on your current conservation performance and how much additional work you are willing to do to address priority natural resource concerns identified by NRCS for New Jersey. CSP is a competitive program that aims to achieve environmental benefits by scoring and then financially rewarding those CSP applicants with the highest conservation performance outcomes. How long are CSP contracts? Contracts last 5 years and can be renewed every 5 years for an additional 5-year period. Contracts can be renewed for an additional 5 years as long as the original contract terms have been met and you make a commitment for continual improvement. Just another benefit of enrolling in CSP. How much funding will you receive? You will receive an unchanging annual payment for active management of ongoing conservation on the operation, plus additional payments for newly adopted conservation practices and enhancements that may vary from year to year. If selected for funding, there's a minimum of $1,500 per year for small acreage farms and up to $200,000 over the life of a 5-year contract for bigger farms that may have a lot of acreage. We'll cover some payment examples in just a bit. Land eligibility. If you control the land and take on the risk of its production, you are eligible for CSP, as long as you are the owner-operator or the operator that has control of the land for 5 years. If you rent your land, it is a good idea to have control of the land for the 5-year period. Ideally, it would be nice to have an agreement that you control that land, but a lease is not necessary. And should you drop rented ground during the 5-year contract period, NRCS will subtract those acres from your payment. Just to clarify, you are not required to enroll rented land that you will not have control of for the 5-year contract period. Some basic eligibility. You must be listed as the operator for the ag operation in the local Farm Service Agency FSA farm records, so it may be necessary to update your records with FSA. As with participation in all other Farm Bill programs, CSP participants must be in compliance with any applicable highly erodible land or wetland conservation requirements. CSP is limited to farmers who have an annual adjusted gross income, AGI, under $900,000. To be eligible for a CSP contract, you must have significant existing conservation on your farm to allow you to exceed the stewardship threshold for at least 2 national resource concerns and be willing to address a 3rd resource concern if you are not already addressing 3 at time of application. We will be giving examples of this in just a bit. Enrollment in the program. First, with any program that you may apply for with the NRCS, eligibility is determined. Second, NRCS assesses your current conservation performance and plan future conservation activities. Third, if you already meet acceptable conservation levels, then you compete in a ranking process. And finally, contracts are awarded to those offering the highest level of environmental benefit, working down through the list until all funds are spent. Priorities, thresholds, and rankings. NRCS will use program software along with a site visit to evaluate current resource conditions on your farm, such as soil erosion, soil health, water quality and quantity, plant condition, livestock condition, wildlife habitat, and energy use efficiency. Resource conditions are evaluated based on geospatial analysis data, such as soil type, texture, and other inherent properties, topography and slope, nearby streams and other waters, and critical wildlife habitat. And of course, your current practices, including crop rotation, tillage, nutrient and pest management, grazing management, and other conservation activities. And of course, on-site observation by you and the NRCS planner that will visit the farm. To be eligible for CSP, your documented conservation activities must meet or exceed at least two of the resource concern categories that are shown here at the time of application offer on all land uses included in the operation, and at least one additional resource concern category by the end of the CSP contract on at least one land use. By assessing where they stand in relationship to each stewardship threshold, you can then choose practices and enhancements to address those resource concerns where additional conservation would be the most advantageous. As I just stated, to be eligible for CSP, first-time applicants must meet or exceed the stewardship threshold for at least two resource concerns shown here on all land uses on the farm at the time of application, and meet or exceed at least one additional resource concern by the end of the contract. As a quick example, if you have cropland, pastureland, and a farmstead, you must be meeting two resource concern categories on all three land uses at the time of application, which is now. And you must meet or exceed an additional resource concern category by the end of the 5-year contract on at least one of those land uses. And we'll look at an example of that in just a bit. Each state must identify 8 state priority resource concerns for ag lands and forest lands. The state priority resource concerns are taken into consideration during the ranking process. The more state priority resource concerns you are meeting at the time of application on all land uses, the more ranking points you will receive. Rankings are also based on the planned activities and the expected conservation benefits. If an applicant has ag lands and forest land and wishes to apply for both, 2 applications would be required because ag lands and forest lands will never compete with each other for funding. What happens if you don't meet the CSP entry-level conservation requirements? If you do not currently meet the CSP entry-level conservation requirements, referred to as the stewardship threshold, then implement improvements now and apply later. Cost share assistance is available through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, for the practices you may need to bring you up to the conservation level needed to be eligible for CSP. The NRCS staff will be happy to talk to you about EQIP and other programs that NRCS offers. Conservation practices, enhancements, and bundles are all collectively known as conservation activities for the purposes of CSP. Conservation practices are the basic conservation activities that have long been supported by EQIP and other cost share programs. Enhancements are conservation activities that take conservation practices to a higher level of stewardship and are more substantial interventions and are unique to CSP. There are several NRCS approved enhancements, each of which is associated with and builds upon, but goes beyond, the basic requirements of the associated conservation practice. Bundles are a group of at least 3 enhancements that work together to provide increased conservation benefits when they are implemented as a group on particular types of farms. If there's an interest in several enhancements, the NRCS staff will make sure to advise our applicants if a bundle is available. If eligible and selected for funding, at least one practice enhancement or bundle must be planned in the first 12 months of the contract on any land use that will be receiving a payment. Next, I would like to introduce Uziel Torres and Betsy McSheen. First, Uziel will share an ag land scenario with us, and then Betsy will share a forest land scenario. At this point, I will stop sharing my screen and give Uziel the opportunity to bring up his PowerPoint. Once Uziel and Betsy are done, I'll take those examples and show you how CSP payments work. With that, Uziel, please proceed with your presentation, and then Betsy, you will follow. And we can see you, Uzis.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Uziel Torres. I'm an acting agronomist for New Jersey, and also I'm a soil conservationist, as Fran said, in the Woodstown field office in this South Jersey, in New Jersey. I would like to share my presentation with you guys, so I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can. Yep, and it's in PowerPoint mode, so it's good.
It's good. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn off my camera and I'm going to start my presentation. So I'm going to do, before I present the enhancements scenarios on the cropland and pasture, I would like to mention that there are 9 specific resource concerns that NRCS planners must be considered for cropland and for pasture land. The resource concern categories are being identified by the national headquarters, where NRCS planners are required to assess for each application on every land use that exists in the operation. I would like to tell you which ones are for cropland and which ones are for pasture. So in cropland, the 9 resource concerns that we must address or consider would be the degraded plant condition, pest pressure, field pesticide loss, field sediment, nutrient, and pathogen loss, soil quality limitation, soil water depletion, terrestrial habitat, concentrated erosion, and wind and water erosion. For pasture, we have degraded plant condition, almost the same as cropland, pest pressure. It will be a change here. For pasture, we'll be evaluating the livestock production limitation, also the field sediment and pathogen loss, soil quality limitation, source water depletion, terrestrial habitat, concentrated erosion, and wind and water erosion. So those are the 9 resource concerns that we're going to evaluate for the CSP program. So in this slide, I want to show you the scenario or the farm that we're going to be giving an example today for CSP. On this slide, that show you the farm operation, and we're going to use an example on this presentation. This is a farm that has 180 acres of grain crops and pasture, and the farm is located in 7 counties in South Jersey. You can see here from the cropland, we have 181 acres planted on a rotation of corn and soybeans, and cover crops are planted in the fall and single species. And we also have 4 acres of pasture where the farmer keeps grazing his beef cows. So the operator is interested in applying for CSP program, and after he submitted his application and had all the documentation on file as required, and that Fran mentioned before, the NRCS planner will set up a field visit to the farm and will have a one-on-one conversation with the farmer about the farming operation, and it will use what we call the conservation assessment ranking tool, we call CART. And CART is an assessment tool that will review the farm's current conservation situation. And that means that this tool will evaluate the conservation practices already in place on the farm, as well as the one that we adopt as a part of the future CSP contract. If the operator of the farm is already doing the great conservation work, this will translate into the operator will meet or will exceed the stewardship threshold, or a higher number for the resource concerned. So the more resource concerned that the operator meet, the higher the annual acre existing practice payment will be, and that will be shown later on one of the examples that Fran is going to show about the payment for each resource concern. Right. So on this slide, you can see after the planner does all the assessment with the CART tool, this is the final product of the tool. And here identifies the amount of resource concerns that meets the stewardship threshold. In this example, for all those national requirement resource concerns that I mentioned before, there are 7 resource concerns that met at the time of the application. So in this case, the cropland met concentrated erosion, field pesticide loss, degraded plant condition, field sediment, nutrient pathogen loss, soil quality limitations, soil water depletion, and wind and water erosion. So this comes from the assessment development by the NRCS planner, including from the answers given by the client and from the on-site observation by the planner during the field visit. So as you heard before from Fran, you need to address at minimum 2 of the national required resource concern at the time of the application to be eligible for CSP program. So in this scenario, and this application already addressed 7 resource concern. So in this case, it's good news for the client. I just want to also mention that every application is unique, and the amount of resource concern to meet depends on the farm operation and the current resource condition on the farm at the time of the assessment. So this is the cropland resource concern that met. And now I want to show you the scenario for the pasture, the 4 acres that the farmer is interested in including a CSP contract. So for the pasture land use, we're going to evaluate this the same way as we did for the cropland. NRCS will need to assess the 9 national requirement resource concern. They're already established for pasture. And this is example for the CART assessment tool. The product, we identified that 5 resource concerns has been met or exceed at the stewardship threshold. And again, you must have to address at least 2 resource concerns at the time of the application to be eligible. And the payment on the amount of national resource concern that the operator addressed at the time of the application. So the more the operator already addressed, the more the payment is going to be. So as you see in this example, the operator will receive a payment for the 7 research concern already addressed on the cropland and 5 research concern addressed in the pasture land. Right. So also, these are the enhancements that the farmer in this example agreed to include in his CSP contract. So in order to receive the payment for the acres of cropland and pasture land, the operator will have to do some type of enhancement. This means that he has to enhance one of the resource concerns that has been met. The one he already met, like the 7 resource concern in the cropland or the 5 resource concern on the pasture land, or he will need to exceed one of the stewardship threshold. So for cropland, the operator decided to implement multi-species cover crop, what we call E340C. And the name, and that includes a multi-species cover crop enhancement. After the implementation of the enhancement, this will help the farmer to exceed the research concern that in this case, as you see, will be soil quality limitations. And I also want to mention that you don't have to commit to all the acres. Like in this case, he commits to the 181 acres of the operation. You can commit from 10 acres, 5 acres to, let's see, 181. It's the same for cropland, it's the same for pasture. So in this case, you can just apply for one part of your land. But it's something important to say that those enhancements has to be implemented on every year of the contract of the CSP contract. And for the pasture would be the same. You will have to implement at least one enhancement. In this case, the producer is going to implement E528I, that is grazing management that protects sensitive areas and surface and groundwater for nutrients. And this will help the farmer to exceed the research concern for source water depletion. And he's going to be implemented on 4 acres. And all this calculation about the payments will be shown later by a friend. So here I want to show you 2 examples of the different conservation enhancement activities that you can review and apply for. In this case, I showed both the one we're presenting today for the example of the scenario. There's a link down here that I believe we're going to share with you later that you can click. Let me see. All right, so I'm going to bring this here. When I click, it takes me to this web page of the CSP fiscal year 2002 with all the enhancements. This is the list of all the enhancements that NRCS offers for the CSP program. And this is divided by soil, resource concern, soil, water, animals, plant, air, and there's some options like air, water, energy, plant, animal. For this example, I'm going to show you the enhancement 340C multi-species for addressing the resource concern of soil. And I hope I can believe I can open it here. All right. So I'm going to give you a little brief of what this is incorporated in this document. And so first you will see the number that we, the NRCS, add to every enhancement. So in this case, it's E340C. And the name of this enhancement is use of multi-species cover crop to improve soil health and increase soil organic matter. And this is related to the conservation practice 340 cover crop. The land use that this enhancement could be applied is going to be on crop, the annual on mix, or crop on perennial. The research concern that, as I said before, will be for soil. And this the lifespan of this enhancement is 1 year of cover crop that most of the time is implemented in the fall. Every enhancement has like a description of what the enhancement is. So for multi-species cover crop, this will add diversity and increase the biomass production to improve the soil health and increase the soil organic matter. And for this specific enhancement for multi-species, there's a minimum of 4 different species that has to be included in the mixed cover crop. And they'll give you some other information about what kind of a species has to be included on the enhancement. Also, in this document, they give you the criteria of what information you will have to. I recommend that this information you review it with your NRCS planner and go through all the list of what is required for this enhancement, and make sure that you're capable to implement this enhancement, and that your farm or your operation is able to be included on this enhancement. I also want to give you this. So this is all the criteria. That would be something that I recommend, again, that you review it with your NRCS planner before you make any decision. Also, there's some information here that the participant will have to include, or will be required to include on enhancement and on the application. And it's going to be the current management rotation, the current field operation, and also what you are planning to include on the management rotation with the cover crop, and the operations and planned field operation for each crop that will be implemented in the future. And there's also some other information. I don't want to go through everything because it's a lot. So this is part of what I have right now. If you have any questions for me, that's something that we can answer. I'm here. So, friend, this is all I have for my presentation.
Thank you, Uziel. And Betsy, are you are up next?
Great, thank you. I'm pulling up my presentation right now. And Fran, if you can confirm for me that you see my slide. Okay. And I'm turning on my camera for just a moment to say hello to everyone and good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I will turn off my camera so to make things continue to run smoothly, but I just wanted to say hello. So I am Betsy McShane. I'm the state biologist for NRCS here in New Jersey. And tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about some of our forestry practices and enhancements that we have available through CSP. So there are over a couple hundred different CSP enhancements available, and that link that Uziel just showed you had all of them listed by the resource concerns, but over 65 of them are related to plants, animals, and wildlife habitat. You may notice that I added to the chat a link to that website that Uziel showed you in his presentation. So let's talk a little bit about using CSP on forested sites. Here we have an example of an overstocked, undermanaged Pine Barrens forested area. Years of lack of forestry practice implementation has led this site to have way too many trees. It lacks diversity, which has reduced the habitat value of it and it's also a huge risk for catastrophic fire. So we worked with the landowners for several years to implement forestry practices through our former Wildlife Habitat Incentives Program and more recently through our Environmental Quality Incentives Program. The landowners had a couple actually at this point, state-approved forest stewardship plans that were written for the site, and they have been implementing practices recommended by the foresters through our conservation programs. The goal of the plan was to include forest stand improvement primarily to bring the stand density down to a healthy level. So once a site has been treated mechanically, other management techniques can then be used on the site. So in this case, you can see that there's been a reduction of the number of standing trees, but there's still quite a bit of vegetation on the site. Other practices were installed, like fire breaks and fuel breaks. And once those have been installed, then we can use other management techniques like prescribed burning to really bring the forest back to a healthy condition. And prescribed burning is one of the practices that we were able to assist the landowner with through our conservation programs. Here's another picture of the same site shortly after a burn was done. Although it may look quite bare right now, vegetation will quickly green up, but it's nice to have those open vistas that are more typical of the pine barren savanna that would have been here a number of years ago. So as Uzi mentioned before, we use a CART tool to assess the current condition of the project site and to evaluate what resource concerns have already been addressed by the practices that the landowner has implemented in the past. So on this particular site, they have already met 5 of our resource concerns at the time of application. They addressed concentrated erosion on the site, the degraded plant condition. They've worked on fire management, soil quality limitations, and wind and water erosion. They have all met the minimum threshold when we utilize the CART tool to assess the site. So here is another screenshot of that website that Uziel showed with all of the enhancements. And you can see that this is the 2022 list of enhancements. So what we do is we make this available to the landowners, and then they took some time to review the different enhancements and look to see which ones were meeting their goals for conservation. And really their main goal is wildlife habitat management. And therefore they focused a lot on some of our enhancements related to the plant and animal resource concerns. Those were the ones that are at the bottom of the list that Uzi showed you. So you can see that there are quite a few that are related to plant and animal conditions and resource concerns. And based on what their goals were for the site, they really focused in on our enhancement 666K, E666K, which is creating structural diversity with patch openings. Some of the other enhancements here that would have been applicable to the site are maybe that 666G, which is to reduce forest density and manage understory along roads to limit wildfire risk and improve habitat. But that's something that they've already implemented on their site. So this, the 666K is something that they would like to do to enhance the work that they've already accomplished. And here is an example of one of those conservation enhancement activity sheets that you saw before for crop and pasture land. This is the one that is specific for creating structural diversity with patch openings. And you'll see that it's applicable to land uses, including forest, associated ag land, and farmstead. And the resource concern that can be addressed by implementing this enhancement are related to plants and animals. And this actually has a lifespan of 10 years. So implementing it once, it's expected that it will remain in place and be functional for 10 years. For this particular enhancement, participants are required to have up-to-date forest management plans that describe the work that will be done to ensure that the enhancement is appropriate and will be implemented correctly. The size, shape, and location is determined based on the stipulations described here. And in our example, the forest plan was written for 50-acre stand. The participant will install 5 patches that are each 1 acre in size for a total of 5 acres throughout the 50-acre site. And the enhancement sheets have directions and instructions on them that stipulate how NRCS will assist with the implementation of the enhancement and all the things that landowners are required to do as well. For example, this enhancement sheet provides information on what some of the requirements and restrictions are. It states that trees removed during patch development have marketable quality and can be sold. So those are one of those specific things that are applicable to this enhancement. For this enhancement, participants are, I already mentioned this about that they are required to have their forestry management plan. And that's something that we worked with the landowners in their EQIP contract to make sure that they had up-to-date forestry management plan. The enhancement sheet also stipulates that NRCS will assist in the implementation and the enhancement of the enhancement. So what we'll do is we'll work with the landowner to review their forestry management plan, see what kind of activities the foresters have recommended, look through those enhancement sheets and help guide the landowner to find ones that are applicable to their site. And then in this particular case, we'll help map out exactly where those patch openings will be implemented, how large they'll be, and in what shape they'll be configured. So here's an example of what the site looks like after implementation of the practice of the enhancement. And now Fran will go through some of the information based on the payments that would be accompanying this enhancement. So I will stop sharing my screen now, Fran, so that you can proceed with providing the information on the payments.
Thank you, Betsy. So we have a question. I get excited about questions. And this is a good pause. This is a good time to pause for anybody else that may have a question. So we always encourage questions because it's what we do. It's how we know what somebody is thinking, or or if we're confusing someone. So that's not our intention here. But Brittany, you asked a really great question, and Brittany wants to know how many years of enhancements are eligible for payment. And I might be actually discussing this in a little bit, but it doesn't hurt to repeat it if I can't really remember everything I've written down here for today. So how many years of enhancements are eligible for payment? 5 years, especially if it's a 1-year lifespan. So in Uziel's example with the cover crop, for example, that's a 1-year lifespan. So you could have a contract with 5 years of an enhancement. Typically, though, Brittany, because we obligate contracts a little later in the fiscal year, seems like our enhancements start in the 2nd year. And once they start, we want to use Uziel's example. If we plan that cover crop in the 2nd year, it must be planned for the remaining years of the contract. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. But it can be 5 years, but because of timing, it's typically just 4. All right. Are there any other questions before I move on to show the payments, how we come up with payments? I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll move on. But again, if anybody has a question, please, please just let me know. And thank you, Uziel and Betsy, for those great scenarios. So now I'm going to show you how CSP payments work. So you must meet the following requirements to earn payments. Schedule and implement at least one additional conservation activity on a land use included in the contract. If you choose not to schedule an additional activity on a land use, you will forgo payment on that land use. To meet this requirement, you do not need to implement a conservation activity on the land use each year, but you do need to implement a conservation activity on the land use during the term of the contract. An annual payment is comprised of contract items for existing conservation activities and additional conservation activities completed in the previous fiscal year. Additional activity payments will be based on the actual extent of the conservation activity you complete each year, and existing activity payments will be the same each year. So if we want to think about the example that Uziel and Betsy just gave us, when we looked at the resource concerns that are being met at time of application and the acres of the land uses, they are considered existing activity payments. The additional activity payment would be that cover crop and would be the enhancement in the forest and would be the enhancement on the pasture land. Every contract will earn a minimum of $1,500 per year, and NRCS will make payments as soon as practical after October 1st of each fiscal year for conservation activities completed in the previous fiscal year. I don't want to confuse anybody, but this is very important to know because participants, number one, they can choose to receive a payment in the first quarter of the fiscal year or delay their payment to the next calendar year. To clarify, our fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th. For example, any enhancement that is implemented between October 1st, 2021 and September 30th, 2022 cannot receive a payment until after October 1, 2022. CSP makes payments the following fiscal year, not when a practice or enhancement is implemented. So that's really important to remember, especially if we plant cover crop. In Uziel's example, that 181 acres of cover crop, if it got planted after October 1st, and I know we have, cover crop planting dates, and I'm from South Jersey, so I'm a little, we plant cover crop a little later in the South than some of our farmers do in the North. But if that cover crop is planted after October 1st, it could be planted on October 5th, 5 days into the new fiscal year. You will have to wait till the following year for your cover crop payment. This chart shows the national resource concerns by land use. This is the same chart that Uziel previously showed. This is very important because the list is used to establish the existing activity payment for resource concerns that are being met at time of application. In Uziel and Betsy's examples, they noted the resource concerns met at time of application. For example, you could meet more than the 9 nationally prioritized resource concerns for cropland on this chart. There are 17 of them, but you would only receive payment for the ones that are identified with an X. In Uziel's example, there's 181 acres of cropland and 4 acres of pasture land. Each land use has its own per acre rate. Cropland and farmstead are $7.50 per acre. Pasture land is $3 per acre, and forest land and associated ag land is 50 cents per acre. For every land use that you plan an additional activity on, you will receive 2 existing payments. This is the per acre payment. In this example, you would earn $1,369.50 per year for the 181 acres of cropland and $12 per year for 4 acres of pasture land, resulting in $6,847.50 over a 5-year period. The second payment that would be earned is the payment for the nationally established resource concerns being met at time of application. In this example, there are 7 for cropland and 5 for pasture land being met that would earn $300 per year, resulting in a $3,600 per year payment and $18,000 payment over a 5-year period for those nationally met resource concerns at time of application. We've learned in order to receive these existing activity payments, you must be willing to adopt a new conservation activity. In this example, multi-species cover crop will be planted, E340C, on the entire 181 acres of cropland for 5 years at a payment rate of $12.98 per acre. And grazing management, E528I, will be implemented on the 4 acres of pasture land at a payment rate of $1.99 per acre for 5 years. In this example, we used 5 years, but as I previously stated, because of timing, it may be hard to plan these enhancements for 5 years, and they may only be able to be planned for 4 years, starting in the 2nd year of the contract. The total payment for a 5-year contract would be $36,634.20. I do want to point out that typically NRCS will not schedule an additional activity in the 1st year of the contract. We are required to schedule an additional activity in the first 12 months of the contract from the obligation date. But because of the timing of the contract, it's almost impossible to implement an additional activity in the 1st fiscal year. Which means more than likely the first payment you receive will be for existing activities only. Once an enhancement with a 1-year lifespan is planned, it must be planned for the remaining years of the contract. In this example, if cover crop was planned in year 2, it would have to continue through year 5. But the pasture land enhancement could be planned in year 3, 4, or 5 because we are meeting the requirement of planning at least one activity in the first 12 months of the contract with cover crop. Betsy's example is a bit easier because we are only dealing with one land use. The first payment is the per acre payment, and forest land is 50 cents per acre. And with the 50 acres that would be $25 per year and $125 for 5 years. In Betsy's example, there were 5 nationally established resource concerns being met at time of application for each receiving a payment of $300, totaling $1,500 annually and $7,500 for the 5 years. This enhancement has a 10-year lifespan. And in this example, we showed 1 acre of patch openings being planned each year at $619.99 per acre. Just to point out, the participant could have planned only 1 acre of patch opening to be completed once, as long as it was scheduled in the first 12 months of the contract. If that was the case, they would not be required to plan a patch opening each year. The total payment for a 5-year contract would be $10,724.95. And just to recap, if this forestry scenario had been maybe a little smaller and it did not reach that $1,500 per year minimal payment, and it was say $1,000 per year, you would get the $1,500 minimal payment per year. So no contract will receive less than $1,500 per year. Fulfilling your CSP contract. Once NRCS has obligated your CSP contract, it is time to begin implementing your conservation plan. This includes maintaining the activities that were already in place on your farm, in addition to implementing the new activities you agreed to in your contract. What to expect next. You may receive a call, email, or mailing letting you know that certain basic eligibility forms are required. Please be mindful of the due date, and it's very important that we establish basic eligibility before we move on with your application. You will also get a call from the local field office to set up a time to visit your site. Then assessments will be completed to establish threshold eligibility. Once threshold eligibility is determined, the field office will reach out to you to go over the enhancements, and you will need to decide what additional activities to implement. Your application will be ranked and a cost estimate will be completed. You will be contacted if you are selected for funding to complete the contract documents.
Fran,
Yes.
we have a question on the chat.
Yep. I was just reading it.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you
Yep.
off.
Nope, that's okay. So give me 1 minute to read it. So farmers will be compensated for already existing and qualified practices. Do I have that right? So yes, you will be compensated, and that is the 2 different types of payments. So annually, you will get a payment for doing the great conservation work you're already doing. So that's what Uziel and Betsy had showed you, already addressing certain resource concerns at time of application. So they are worth $300 a resource concern. And then we also give you an existing payment based on the number of acres that you have, whether it's cropland or pasture land, or if you have a forest land application. So that is the 5 years worth of payments that will never change. And I shouldn't say never, because if you did happen to lose a piece of ground that you were renting, then we would have to make an adjustment to that existing payment. But typically, that is a payment that will never change. The payment that can change annually is the extra enhancement, whatever you are doing to enhance the resource concerns that you are already addressing, that those payments could change annually. But as far as the existing payments, it's based on what you are doing now. So I hope I answered your question. And if I did not, Sherry, please let me know or type in no, you did not, and I will try to do a better job. Oh, good. I answered it. Yay. So, all right. And thank you for the question. So, Uzi L, you will now cover what you can do to prepare for your meeting with NRCS.
Hey, Fran, there's a question in the chat before we go to the next.
All right, hold up, Uziel. Can you add additional improvements?
No problem.
Yes, so absolutely. We encourage, so the question is, can you add additional improvements beyond the one required? So that is a great question because we encourage you to improve as many resource concerns as you see fit. So whatever enhancements that you see that you think you could implement on your farm, please discuss it with the NRCS staff because there is no limit. Well, we have a payment limitation, you know, for our bigger farms, right? For our really big acreage farms, but we have no limit on how many enhancements, or even if you need to do a practice before an enhancement. So whoever visits you from NRCS can help you understand that a little better. But that is a great question because we have no limitations on that. And I hope I answered your question. So Uziel, if you are ready, you can please proceed with what you can do to prepare for your meeting with NRCS.
All right. Okay, I will do it. So what you guys are supposed to be prepared to start the process for the CSP. So my recommendation, I have a few documents that maybe you will have in hand when you're gonna meet with your NRCS planner to start the process of evaluating your operation. And my first recommendation would be to, you know, as I mentioned before, read about all the enhancements that you may include in your CSP application. As you know, I think Betsy mentioned it, there's also around over 200 enhancements available on the NRCS webpage that are related to CSP enhancement. And if you have some time, I know it's a lot, it's 200 enhancement, but take a look, study each enhancement that you think is feasible for your operation and identify, if you can identify by the number, as I mentioned before, the E340I. So have a list of all the enhancements that you're interested. So when you meet with the planner, you will be able to show what is your interest in that, and maybe he will be able to explain what those enhancements are. And also, I would tell you there's a list of documents that maybe would be good to have in for that meeting. And as I show in the cover crop enhancement, it would be good to have your current management rotation and get what kind of field operations you have for each crop in each land use. I would recommend also map of the fields if you are able to have that, or maybe you can request it to the Farm Service Agency if you don't have it in hand, or you can request to the planner to bring those maps to the on-site visit. I also will recommend if you can make a list of all the conservation practices that you already implemented in your operation. Because remember, if you as much conservation practices you have, you will address more research concerns, and that will be a payment that will be able to have in the CSP contract. I also recommend that maybe you can bring some of the pest management records that you have for your operation, nutrient management records, and for forestry, I don't know, Betsy, you have any other more information, but I will say bring your forest stewardship plan that it's been approved by the state forester. That's something else that maybe it would be good to have in hand for that on-site meeting. And that's the kind of list that I have. I don't know, Betsy, if you have any other document that you think would be necessary.
No, I think that's very comprehensive. And yes, the approved forage stewardship plan would be key to answering the questions as you go through the CART evaluation. And Uziel did mention things like practices that have been implemented. We certainly would have records of anything that you did with NRCS, but maybe it's been a while since you reviewed your conservation plan with your planner. So it'd be a good time to go through any old plans that you have and check off what practices have been implemented, maybe on your own.
Thank you, Betsy. And so that's all I have, Fran.
All right, thank you, Uziel and Betsy. So moving on, we are just about at the end of the CSP presentation. So I just wanted to point out, for more information, you can visit the NRCS USDA.gov programs in New Jersey website, and I'll just go there very quickly to show you. Hopefully, as I bring this over, you can see it. And can everybody see our website? Somebody could just tell me.
Yes, Fran.
Yep. Thank you. So, there's a couple different ways. We have lots of information on our website. We're real proud of our website. So, we always keep like events and deadlines here. And here, just under programs, under financial assistance, and I could maybe put a more direct, like take it to this. I could replace this website here and take you directly to this page, which might be a little more helpful, because here you'll see all, the different programs we offer here in New Jersey. So all you'd have to do is click on the CSP banner, and it's going to open to our New Jersey CSP webpage. And right here is a great place to see the payment rates for the practices and enhancements we offer. We have the ranking questions here, and we also have the CSP priority resource concerns. And then very important is the CSP activity list for participants. So if you click on that, it will give you the whole list of enhancements in a nice condensed list. And then after you see enhancements that you may be interested in, then you could always go right over here to the left, and you see the enhancements and bundles. You would just have to click on that, and it'll take you to the national CSP webpage, where it would give you all those sheets that describe those enhancements, practices and enhancements, or we really only went over enhancements. So this is really an important and great resource in the webpage, just because you could see payments and you could see ranking questions. And then, of course, you can see all the enhancements. I am trying to read a couple questions here. Do I need to answer any of these questions, or have they been answered?
Well, Fran, I feel like they've been answered, but others, on the phone might want to know this information. So Sherry says she has unmanaged forest and has never consulted with a forester, and she's asking how to find a forester. And so Nicole then says, we can give you a list of foresters in your county. And Betsy also says, which is a good point, the state of New Jersey maintains a list of approved foresters. And also of note is that NRCS has funds available to help fund forestry planning through EQIP. And NRCS maintains a list of foresters called technical service providers, or TSPs. And we can share, each local office can share those lists with you, or you can actually find them on the web page, but we can help you to get there.
And then thank you for that, Gail. And then we have a question from Eric that says, from the beginning of the presentation, what constitutes a small farm? A small farm can be really, really small. It can be by visiting the Farm Service Agency, as long as it meets their definition, and they will assign it a farm and tract number, it can be considered a farm. So, you know, it can be very small acreage. So I hope that answered your question, Eric, but small is small because we do not, we do not, I don't want to say discriminate, but, we do not, anything we do is not size, it's size neutral, whether you're big farm or small farm. And thank you for all these questions because that is really great. We like questions, at least I feel like, when I get a question, I'm like, wow, at least everybody was paying attention. So that makes me really happy. So thank you for all the questions. If there's any more questions, please continue to put them in the chat, because at this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we are going to go to Nancy Paolini, and she's going to give us an overview of farmers.gov. And Nancy, I'll let you explain what farmers.gov is. So if everybody hangs tight, if you have some more questions after Nancy has completed her presentation, we would be glad to answer those. And Nancy, I could see your screen.
Great, thank you. And thank you for asking me to present. I will be brief. What I'd like to present to everyone is our program that we call farmers.gov. And some of you may already be involved in this, but it's not unlike online banking. So I will present a short presentation. I'm going to turn off my camera now so that it maintains my internet here. Okay. Okay. So in farmers.gov, I'm just showing you the main screen that you would go to. The web address, I've added some web addresses at the very end of my presentation, and it's really easy. It's farmers.gov, so pretty easy to use. Some of the things that you can do online, which I think are very, very interesting. You can access your land information on desktop computer, tablet, or phone. Your capabilities are you can view, print, export your detailed farm records, such as your cropland, base acres, yields, CRP acres, land ownership details, and much more. Pretty much everything that NRCS and FSA have in your profile. You can also view, print, and export your farm and track maps, which you can then use to provide to your lenders, your chemical or fertilizer providers, FSA for reporting acreage, and crop insurance agents. You can export your land unit into Esri shapefiles if you're a GIS user. You can also import them. So you can, if you have a better map that's done with GIS, if you have a better map than FSA has, you can import your map and talk to them and they can update it. A lot of times it's difficult to delineate land units, especially if there's a lot of wooded areas where you really can't see any kind of field edges. This is an example of what you might see when you log in to your account. You would see your farm, your tract information. The land would be delineated with these lines and the fields and everything. So it's pretty much what we see and what we use when we're doing the conservation plans. You can also, and this is more the admin side of things, and I think this is really important. You can view, upload, download, and e-sign your documents. So let's say you're on vacation and your contract is ready to be signed. You can do it online. You can also request your conservation assistance. You can put in an application for a contract. Now, you know, some of our stuff is a little complicated, so it's always advisable to call your local office and speak to your planners. But you can do a lot of requests right here online. You can request financial assistance. You can apply for CSP or EQIP right through the farmers.gov, and also view and request application details. You can reference technical terms and submit questions if you don't understand something that's going on, or if you get a letter, you can go online and figure out what's going on. You can access information on your current and past conservation practices. Let's say if you can't remember, what was I supposed to, what practice was I supposed to install, or which fields was I supposed to plant that cover crop in this year, and you can't find your conservation plan map. Well, it'll all be there online for you. And when you do complete a practice, you can just go online. It's late at night and you forgot to call the office before they close. You can go in and report that it's been completed. Please come out and check it out. And the sooner that happens, the sooner you can get your payments. This is important up here. It's you can view detailed information about your contracts, including your cost share assistance, what you've received, what you're anticipating getting, and this you have to do in person in an FSA office, but you can work with FSA and NRCS if you have someone that's an active power of attorney or a partnership in your business. You can work with the FSA office, and you can actually do a lot of this. Once it's set up, you can log in to the farmers.gov and then switch over to the business, and you can manage some of the aspects of the business, and likewise your partners can too. Okay. For those of you that had FSA Farm Plus a couple years ago, or Conservation Client Gateway, this replaces that. So they've combined the two of them, which is why you can get your FSA crop reporting and all of that stuff, as well as your NRCS contracts. It does require a level 2 e-authentication, and I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. And it does require that FSA has your active email address. If you don't have an email address with them, then the online process won't work. And it's just as simple as calling the office and letting them know your email address, but that does have to be in place. To get started, you can do a lot of this yourself if you have your customer record with FSA up to date, and if your current email address is on file. If you have that on file, you can actually do most of this online. So once you have that in place, you can go to the farmers.gov and just select create an account. And I'm not going to walk you through the whole process, but just so you know, you're basically creating a level 2 e-authentication account first. Some of you may already have that, or you may already have the farmers.gov. If you don't have it, you're going to need to either verify your identity online, or once you create the e-authentication account, if you fail the online verification, like it might ask you some questions like what year did you get your mortgage or things like that. If you fail those questions, and it's not uncommon that they wouldn't work. You would have to go to your local office to verify your identity. And that does seem extreme, but you have to remember this is just like online banking. So you don't want someone who is not you opening your account and getting in there. So that being said, like I said, you do have to go in person or verify online. You should always use your home address and your information, because this account is for you as a person. So when it asks you questions like, where did you live in 1982? It's not asking for your business. It's asking for you as a person. And I put this here just as a little break here because, again, you're looking at your account, your land that you own, your or rent, your crop base, all these things, your contracts, how much you're getting in payments. So you don't want to ever share your login or your password. If you have a partnership, an LLC, some sort of business, everyone should just get their own level 2 account, and then you go in with FSA and you work out the partnership representation, and then everyone can get in and do what they're authorized to do. But you don't want to share logins and passwords. I can't stress that enough. So here's what I was just saying. Each partner or employee in a business should have their own level 2 account, and that includes anyone with a power of attorney. And FSA can set you up with that. So once you've got your level 2 account, you're ready to go into farmers.gov, and you will see your data. And, it's pretty amazing. See your maps, conservation plans, all kinds of things. Here are some important links. I believe what's going to happen is after this is over, we're going to send you these PowerPoints so that you'll be able to just click on these links, because I realize right now on the screen you can't actually click on them. And that's about it, really. If anybody has any questions, and then questions about the farmers.gov, but also, I guess, if you want to continue with the questions about the CSP or the other things that we talked about. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Nancy. So Nancy is correct. I don't see any questions posted, Nancy, about farmers.gov or CSP, but please, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. I know this might have been a lot of information quickly, but at any time you can reach out to your local field office and they will be glad to answer any questions you may have. It was never our intention to overwhelm anybody, but just to give you some basic CSP, a little basic CSP overview, what makes up a payment, how you are eligible for the program. Everybody that has participated, I assume, has already applied for CSP. So you will be hearing from someone in the local field office that you deal with. So I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I believe we answered all the questions that were presented to us. So with no further questions or comments, Julie, if you would like to close out the meeting, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to thank everyone for joining this evening. I'd also especially like to thank our team for their preparation and presentations for tonight's session. Fran, Uziel, Betsy, and Nancy, thank you so much and good job. We hope this session was helpful to you, and we look forward to assisting you with your application and conservation objectives. And I hope you all have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.